right, we are live. Greetings, Sigma Chi brothers and guests. Welcome to the latest signature series event titled A Toy Story. My name is Grayson Stepanek. I am a graduate of the University of Louisiana at Lafayette 2022 Lambda Psi, and I'm excited to host this signature series event brought to you by the Sigma Chi Member Engagement Committee, where we highlight the stories and successes of our fellow Sigma Chi brothers. I have the distinct honor of introducing our guest this evening, Brother Dan Meyer. If the name sounds familiar, you may recognize him from his recent feature in the spring 2025 edition you can see on screen of the Magazine of Sigma Chi. We're excited to have him on tonight to dive deeper into his Sigma Chi story and his fun-filled career. Dan was initiated into the Zeta Psi chapter at the University of Cincinnati in 1999. He is now the head of brands at Bonkers Toys, which is a trailblazer at the forefront of the toy industry's evolution. With a keen eye for emerging digital trends, Dan has been instrumental in transforming viral internet sensations into tangible products that resonate with today's youth. Under his leadership, Bonkers Toys has launched successful toy lines for prominent YouTube creators such as Ryan's World, LankyBox, Aphmau, and Moriah Elizabeth, bridging the gap between online content and physical play. Dan's innovative approach was also pivotal in bringing the quirky Skibidi Toilet meme, which some of you may know, from screens to store shelves, showcasing his ability to harness digital phenomena and translate them into marketable products. Fun fact, I actually saw that toy on the Christmas aisles last year and had to let Dan know before we hopped on. His work is getting out there. His expertise lies in identifying and nurturing new media brands and ensuring that Bonkers Toys remains a leader in the ever-changing landscape of children's entertainment. Dan, welcome to the live stream.
Grayson, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. I always enjoy doing stuff like this. And yeah, that was a heck of an intro. Hopefully I can live up to how awesome that intro was. But yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you again for giving your time, your energy, your expertise to this conversation, and just getting together as brothers, talking with other brothers and guests about what you do and the impact that Sigma Chi has had on your career. So before we get started, I want to extend an invitation to any of our viewers to ask questions to Dan by using the comment and chat feature. At the end of the interview, we'll take questions from the audience as time permits. So Dan, I want to kick it off with just a question of what toys in your youth inspired you to pursue the toy industry as a career?
Yeah, good question. Well, if you're looking at my Cincinnati 2004, you can probably extract my age. So when I answer that, it'll date me. But I grew up in the era of like Star Wars figures and He-Man and G.I. Joes, right? And particularly Star Wars. And fun fact, the company that was producing Star Wars figures was based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, my hometown, obviously where my alma mater for undergrad is. And so I grew up, and they were called Kenner Toys, which later got sold to Hasbro, which still makes Star Wars figures today. So when I was a kid in my hometown, it was a big deal for us. Like everybody would be talking, oh, these toys are made from Cincinnati, and we were really proud of that. And I remember as a kid, I was really good at art, or so my parents told me, and I would draw drawings and say, hey, what about this? This would be a cool new character for Star Wars toys. And my parents would be like, yeah. And I said, can you send that to Kenner? And they would say, yeah, of course we're going to send it. And they didn't. They kept them all. And so when I declared my major for undergrad as industrial design, and the toy design is a part of that, they said, I think you made the right choice, right? So that being from Cincinnati and having Kenner Toys there, when they would ask, what do you want to do when you grow up? A lot of little kids say, I want to be an NBA player. I want to be a fireman or whatever. I said, I want to be a toy designer for Kenner. And lo and behold, that's what happened. So yeah, to answer your question, what toys from my youth? Star Wars, and Kenner right here in my hometown.
I love that. That's such a unique way to bring it back to the very beginning, but it shows how, things that are instrumental in our childhood affect us later on. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
In the article, in the magazine, you mentioned the idea that different temperaments, talents, and convictions, which is a concept Sigma Chi's know very well, is a key factor in making a good life experience and a good company. Are there any other lessons that you learned from Sigma Chi that you still rely on in your work today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's tap into that first, phrase that you said there: different talents, temperaments, and convictions. Um, I think one of the reasons I was really drawn into Sigma Chi, when I was rushing, is I saw that immediately when I was rushing the other fraternities on UC's campus. Everybody just kind of felt the same, right? Like your traditional frat boy. But when I went to Sigma Chi, I could see it. They had guys that were athletes. They had guys that were design guys. They had guys that were, one guy was in a death metal band, and I was like, this is awesome, right? So I saw that, right? And then when I was joining, I went to the design school at UC. There's not a lot of frat guys in the design program. And so, and then in the fraternity, I was the design guy, right? But that shaped your experience to really understand these different perspectives. I think the buzzword now is diversity, right? Diversity, not just in, skin color or something, but in talents, temperaments, and convictions, thoughts, interests. And I saw that right away, right? And that just created a much richer experience for me on the educational side of college, on the social side of college. And that really got me thinking, about not just, in terms of like hanging out with different types of people, but what I can learn, how I can network, genuinely network, right? And that was just so fruitful for me. So that and just of a lesson of like, I'm going to learn something from people that have a different experience from me or a different talent. And imagine if we are united in our values, but we have different skills, how powerful that is, right? And like look at sports analogies, right? Like if you guys are like, the Patriots were a good example of that, right? They all had these different talents, like the weirdest collection of talent at some point, but different talents, but they all believed in the same value system. That's why they had that dynasty with Belichick and Brady and crew. And it's like I've just seen that. I guess I really started to learn that right away when I rushed in Sigma Chi, and then everywhere I've been in my professional life and in my personal life, that foundational, I mean, really, it's just that simple. That phrase, different talents, temperaments, and convictions, has just played such a unique role. And like, we'll talk a little bit more about Bonkers Toys, but I saw that here as well. A lot of toy companies kind of do the same thing. They chase, a big Hollywood movie, right? We want to make, Star Wars, the example I gave. We want to make the next, Avengers movie toys. That's a safe bet. But I saw these guys at Bonkers, the guy who started the company, and he had just such different perspective, like united values, but such different perspective. I want to go after these YouTubers and creators, and it was just different, yet the same. And it's like that. That's why we're so successful. So I think that just really stuck home, just in general. You know what I mean? Right away and throughout all those experiences, and in present day, right? So
Yeah. I completely agree. That's actually whenever I was reading your segment, that was one of the things that stuck out to me. Because that's always been the one of the core tenets of Sigma Chi that has always been very near and dear to me is different temperaments, talents, and convictions, and just the strength that comes from everybody else's unique strengths and leveraging those. So I love how that's carried on into your career. So we talked about you getting design experience, especially in undergrad, and spending time on film sets later in your career. Are there any specific experiences that you are particularly proud of when it comes to those film set design times?
Oh yeah, for sure. Gosh, a lot. We've done stuff. I'm going to highlight a few and then go into detail on one. I mean, we've done everything from Hollywood movies to I've done WWE toys, right? So you're behind the scenes at like WrestleMania and you're kind of learning the lore, and there's a whole science to all that. It's just been a wild experience. I mean, here's a good story from the design experience on WWE. You're going backstage and you're trying to get an understanding of like, clearly they're all actors. Everybody knows that, right? I hope I didn't spoil the fun.
Yeah, sorry to break anybody's heart.
Yeah. But every one of their characters they portray has a lore behind them, and a characterization and all these details. So you really try to talk to those guys and understand a little bit. Some of them have outfits and accessories or certain moves they do, and you talk to them and you try to figure out, how am I going to translate all that into a toy that makes sense, right? And it's wild, it's fascinating, it's fun, and you get all these crazy stories. One of the big WWE heels, that's what they call a bad guy, for a long time. He later turned good. His name was Kane. You might remember him. He was, he had that scary mask.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's walking around. We're backstage, and this is way before WrestleMania is actually starting. And they're like, "Oh, the toy guys are here," and he takes off his mask and goes, "Hi, I'm Glenn. Do you guys get any cookies? Do you guys want some cookies?" And it's just, it's just wild how different things are and like the stories you can tell. But in movie sets, one of the most fun movie sets that I was on was, and I think the article talked a little bit about it, the Chronicles of Narnia. We're filming in Prague, which was amazing. And the director of that was Andrew Adamson, who's probably most famous for directing the Shrek movies. And, you're kind of seeing all these props. You're seeing the set design, costume design, all of it. And again, just like WWE, you're talking through all of these filmmakers, the prop masters, the stunt masters, the actors themselves, and trying to get all this lore and all this detail out of it, right? And it's just wild to see. You're going to pick up this massive sword. The thing looks like it should weigh 200 pounds, but it weighs like 5 pounds because it's made of foam. But it looks immaculate, right? It's just really cool. And you see all the makeup going on. I'm sure everybody's seen some behind the scenes movies here or there. And then on that set, we do technology now where we do a lot of 3D scanning, right? So like if you want to capture the likeness of an actor, you go into a 3D scanning booth, and there's the lasers that'll go over your face, get the geometry of your face pretty perfect. And then you can shrink that down to the size you need, create a prototype, and then we can create a steel mold to mass produce, right? So we're doing that with all the talent. And then we were going to make There, in Narnia lore, there's something called a Telmarine soldier. He's like the stormtrooper of Narnia. So, and we were just going to use a random extra, right? An actor who's just some, extra guy from Prague. Nobody knew his name. And I was like, you know what? Great, buddy. Thanks. I'll hop in there. So I hopped in. We scanned my face, and we put those on all the Telmarine soldiers. So, when those toys came out, you can still find them on eBay. When those came out, you could have gone to Target, Walmart, Toys R Us, wherever, and they're sitting on the shelf. There's the Dan Meyer action figure. Of course, my parents probably bought most of them, and they're in a case in their basement. But So it's just, there's fun stuff like that on all these sets, So
I love that. That's truly unique life experiences. I'm glad you got that time to shine too. And if you ever make it to Grand Chapter or anything, please bring me an extra toy. I will definitely take one.
Yeah.
So, okay, transitioning to the next question. I know you spent much of your early career and time working internships, and you were hopping from city to city. The magazine segment covers that, and you were staying with different SIGs that were in each area. What was the transition into these environments like for you? Was it always easy, or did it ever require a lot more effort than you expected or than others? And do you still keep in touch with those SIGs?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. So why I was doing that is because the University of Cincinnati has a co-op program. And that meant at that time we were on quarters. They've now shifted semesters. But you would go to school for a quarter, 3 months. Then you'd have a paid internship called a co-op for 3 months, back to school for 3 months. And so you do this on and off for 5 years, which is great because you're getting this real world experience. UC has a great program for that. And it just so happened that in my field, there wasn't a lot in Cincinnati. So I'd have to move to random cities to get this co-op experience. And to answer your question, Grayson, it was kind of hard because you're like, I've never moved out of Cincinnati. I don't know what I'm doing. And at the time, it was before, yeah, we had the internet, but there wasn't things like sublet.com or, Airbnb or whatever, right? Like, so you had to just figure it out. Oftentimes you'd have to drive to the city and apartment hunt, right? So what I would do is I say, you know what? I'm just going to email the local alumni chapter and the local undergrad chapter. I can find who's like the consul or whatever and email them. And it always worked out. Right? Somebody always answered the call. And again, that was another sign that I knew Sigma Chi, how powerful and how important it really was, because everybody, multiple people would always answer the call, right? So it was hard in the sense that it was just unknown, right? But Sigma Chi and that support system and that level of trust and brotherhood and having each other's backs, it was always there. And then let me see. I'm getting to the other parts of your question. Yeah, I mean, the first time I moved in, that's when I lived with Luke Donald, right? And so, hey, I need a roommate. And I got to admit, of course, I know the PGA guys, but I wasn't a huge follower of collegiate golf. And he had won, I believe it's called the Hodges Award, Luke, if I'm misinterpreting that and saying that correctly. Somebody correct me, but that's like the Heisman for golf, right? So I'm Googling this Luke guy, and I'm like, holy cow, he won the Hodges Award. He's a national champ. He was graduating at that time, and I was still I think I was a sophomore, right? So, but that was awesome. And then, so I kind of knew that he'd be pretty good, because he won the NCAA national champion, the individual one. And it was awesome, because I'm walking around with Luke, and of course everyone in Evanston and Chicago, knew who he was. And oh, who's the mysterious new guy hanging out with Luke? I felt awesome. You know what I mean? And then, so I would just always do that. And ironically, another story about co-op is our I guess you would call it, what's the word I'm looking for? Not counselor, but the person who worked for the University of Cincinnati, who kind of managed and coordinated all the co-op internship stuff. One day I'm going in there, and the guy's reading my resume, and he's like, where do you want to work next? Of all this stuff. And I said, oh, Fisher-Price Toys. They have a co-op. I really want that one. Yeah, that would be my dream. And he's looking at my resume. He's like, oh, Sigma Chi. And then he slips me the handshake. And it's just like that immediate connection. I mean, of course, he knew that I was genuine, and I had this nice resume and a portfolio. And, I wasn't just going in there saying, give me a job because I'm Sigma Chi. I didn't even know that about him. But he sees that. And sure enough, he made it happen for me. Peter Bartlett was his name. So I saw that, and then that got me an internship where I met a ton of people who weren't Sigma Chi's, but really benefited me in my career. I did that in Buffalo, New York, and Fisher-Price. So I just kept doing that. And then when it came for my first real job, I was moving to South Florida at the time, and I didn't know anybody, and I didn't really even know much besides it was really hot. So I'm moving to Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and I did the same thing. I reached out to the alumni chapter. Is anybody, any young guys that need a roommate down there? A couple people answered the call, and Connor, I'm sorry, your name didn't get mentioned in the feature article in the magazine, but I move in with this guy who was consul at Ohio University the same time I was consul at Cincinnati, but we never met each other. I mean, I think we were at LTW together, but never really connected. So he emails me, says, yeah, I'm from Ohio, I'm living down here. I need a roommate. All right, works out. So I move in with him, start talking. He's like, my family's from Cincinnati originally. Oh, they are? What part? This, that, We find out our grandpas are best friends. And we have a picture of them lined up on a class of 1939 North College Hill High School in Cincinnati, Ohio, in leather helmets lined up. We printed that sucker out and had it framed in our apartment in Fort Lauderdale. How crazy is that?
Yeah, that talk about the connections that Sigma Chi can afford you, because that is just wow. I've had some experiences myself rather recently. I met a local news producer at one of the top of the news station. I mentioned I was a Sigma Chi in my news segment, and he's like, I'm a Sigma Chi too. And I'm like, yeah. Are you? And he's like, I am. I was like, all right, well, now I know. Funny enough, he was Pledge Brothers with Brad Pitt at a Mizzou.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's funny in all the connections. I love that. And you were a world traveler too. I can only wish. So you mentioned Significant Sig and professional golfer and just extraordinaire, Luke Donald. And I was wondering, did you ever get the feeling during your early time in Sigma Chi that you were meeting brothers who would go on to do amazing things such as yourself? I mean, you kind of had an idea with Luke. I mean, like you said, he won effectively the Heisman for golf. But did you feel that with the other brothers that you were meeting?
Yeah, I'd say that I did, right? Because you could there was a higher ambition you know. Hey, there's Bob Albrecht. Hey, good to see you. You could just kind of feel the standards were higher, like with ambitious purposes, right? Like that's part of the Jordan standard. And you saw that, whether that's in undergrad, whether that's right out of school, I just felt like there was definitely ambitious purposes, congenial disposition, all that stuff. You could just feel it, see it. Guys were talking about visions for their life that were much greater than I just want to get a job and mail it in and watch ES Sports Center every night. We were always talking about bigger picture things. You could feel that, right? And then of course, that's one of the things that drew me in when I was pledging too. Cincinnati guys like Bob, who just said hi there in the chat and signed off. You would see Cincinnati rushing. We have this tradition called the steak fry, and where all these alumni come back, we do a big steak dinner for all the pledges. And there's some storytelling from some of the older guys. And I was just so impressed by that, right? Because there were guys that would get up and speak, and there would be these, pretty illustrious careers. And you're like, wow, this is a place I want to be. Like, I can feel it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I'd say, you could feel that. You knew guys, whether they were the older alumni, whether they were, guys around your age that were just talking about a bigger purpose. Like, you could sort of feel that. And Grayson, I want to mention it this time too. When I moved to South Florida, but all around, I would meet guys not just my age in the fraternity, but way older. One of my best friends in South Florida was a Sigma Chi named Bill Smart. He's since passed away, but Bill graduated from the University of Cincinnati in 1954. Okay, and I graduated in 2004. We're 50 years apart, and we became best friends in Florida. Okay, he was in my wedding when I got married. And he would call me. This guy was so special. Those older generations, they were classic. He would call me every year on my birthday, even after I moved back to Ohio. It didn't pop up on his Facebook. He didn't have Facebook like we do now. He remembered, right? And he had an illustrious career. He was the first creative director of McGraw-Hill Publishing. His best friend from undergrad at UC was Michael Graves, a world-renowned architect, significant SIG. So just meeting these guys, you just kind of knew it was a totally different set of goals and ambitions that we had for each other. And the other thing I'd layer into that is everybody had like a noble purpose with it. It wasn't like a crypto bro where I want to be rich and drive boats. It was like everybody had a higher reason for being, possessed of good morals, ambitious purposes, all that. So you want success, but it's got to be layered into those values. And I think you could really see that and feel that. I certainly did. Even the other guy I named who we were friends, our grandpas knew each other, Connor, he's moved back to Ohio too, and he's really doing well. I think he's the CEO for some sort of sporting company. But yeah, you can see that all around. A lot of my pledge brothers too, doctors, one is an ambassador in training, tech startups, just great stuff.
Yeah, I love that. One, that's a common experience among Sigma Chi's, but it's also is a testament to the quality of brothers that we keep bringing in to the fraternity, that they do fulfill the Jordan standard and that they have all these ambitions for a noble purpose, which I really like that you highlighted that. It wasn't any kind of selfish me type desires to move forward, but it was a more holistic, for the betterment, greater good type ideal. So I love that. So you mentioned having, older friends, even mentors to a certain extent, and everyone needs a mentor in their life. Sigma Chi, we have a built-in mentorship in undergrad with bigs and littles. And you seem to have found an amazing one that was highlighted about significant SIG, Greg Staley. How helpful was it to you to not only find a great mentor who also was a SIG, but how did that relationship differ from other mentors that you have?
Yeah, Greg is a phenomenal guy. So if anyone ever knows him or gets a chance to talk to him, he's just a phenomenal guy, professionally, personally, storyteller. And how I met Greg is I actually grew up with one of Greg's nephews, but I didn't put the two and two together. I didn't know this was his uncle. Like, even though they shared the same last name, you just don't put that together right away sometimes. And I'd heard about him. I think at the time I was pledging, he was running Toys R Us. I mean, that's a huge enterprise, right? And he later became the CEO of KB Toys, which was the big toy store in shopping malls back when shopping malls were still a thing. So he had this big career in toys. So when I'm doing this toy stuff, some of the alumni I had known about Greg, and some of the alumni there said, hey, you got to talk to Greg a little bit more. So I started to build this rapport with him. And the thing I love about Sigma Chi, going back on what we talked about previously, Grayson, is the connection is genuine. It was never like I was trying to build a rapport with Greg because I just wanted him to like recommend me for a job. It's because I genuinely wanted to learn, and he genuinely wanted to help, And so that started off with getting introduction because I knew about him. I'm in the same industry, and it just turned into, as I'm navigating my career, bouncing questions off him. Like, should I do this? This opportunity is presenting itself. What do you think about this? And I didn't have anyone to give me that. My dad wasn't in the toy industry. My mom wasn't in the toy industry, right? Like, they'd never even moved out of Cincinnati in their lives, and I was navigating. But guys like Greg helped me navigate that. And so at any problem or any question, big or small, life-changing, he was always there for me to give me that insight and guidance and network. Oh, maybe you should talk to this guy, and it was just phenomenal. I was very lucky to have that, especially with how kind of niche our industry is, right? And sure enough, we find out there's more Sigma Chi's in the toy industry too. But he's phenomenal, still is. And that steak fry I was telling you about, now I'm back in Cincinnati. He's back in Cincinnati. We go to that, and we're trying to help out younger guys, and we see each other there. And he's just great. And he had such a great career himself. I believe he's a significant Sig too. So see, that goes back to show you there's something in the water at the Sigma Chi house, So.
Completely agree. Wow, I love that. I love how you are also becoming mentors yourself. You got mentored from Greg, and now you're going back to the chapter and offering insight yourself. You're passing the torch along. So that's fantastic. So you mentioned a desire to reciprocate everything Sigma Chi has done, and we kind of briefly touched on it right there. Have you had any opportunities to engage with undergrads or young members that are on similar career journeys to you? Have you met any of the guys at the steak fries that are wanting to get into the toy industry as well, or just, across the country?
Yeah. Not so much that want to jump straight into the toy industry specifically, but creative fields for sure. Gosh, I've been back in Cincinnati for I don't know, 6 or 7 years at least. So I've been going to these steak fries. Some of the guys I met right when I moved back at the steak fry are already in their professional lives now. Just trying to help them out with that, and also trying to give guidance too. Like, take some risks, right? Like, don't be afraid to take an internship, to move somewhere. You're going to have this network. Reach out to this network, right? Like, if you need someone to meet some friends in a new city you lived in, go for it. You have them. Reach out, and I always just try to remind them too, when you are doing that networking, just make sure that it's genuine. Like, don't be in it for, obviously you want to be successful in your career. I'm not saying that, but just make sure you're genuine, right? So yeah, I'm actively doing that. And I've also been blessed, like Greg and Bob, who you just saw log off earlier. Cincinnati has such a great alumni chapter, and it's almost like taught when those guys were mentoring people like me. They didn't say it specifically, but they said it without having to say it. You got it. When it's your turn, you got to do this again, right? So it's just kind of built into the culture. So yeah, definitely a desire to reciprocate that, and definitely trying to do it when and where I can. And and that's the biggest thing I say is, like, take risks. You have a community, reach out to them. Don't be afraid of that. Keith Ferrazzi, significant Sig, he wrote a book, I don't know, about 20 years ago called Never Eat Alone. And that just stuck with me. Like, and what that means is, you have an opportunity for lunch, you can go eat by yourself or with your buddies. You also have the opportunity to go network with someone, and people love sharing. So to the younger guys, I always say, just ask people. They don't even have to be a Sigma Chi, right? But ask someone to go to lunch. Ask them if you can just call them over lunch. People want to share with you their experiences. Do it. You're going to learn so much, and you're going to build genuine relationships.
1000% agree. I've heard a tip when you talk about people wanting to share is that if you ask for advice, you are almost always going to get what you ask for and more. Instead of asking for help, you ask for advice, and people feel like they have the opportunity to share something that's important to them. So I love how you mentioned that. So we're going to transition into questions from the audience. So if you have any additional questions, please put them in the chat. Dan, this first one says, is there a new Evel Knievel out there? I loved his toys back in the day.
Yeah, an Evel Knievel toy. I'm not sure if there is right now, but I think there is, because there's a trend of retro toys happening. So things that might have came out 20 years ago, 50 years ago, whenever, people are remaking those. And like, my company does not do that, but companies are. And I believe recently someone brought out and relaunched that Evel Knievel, like ripcord, flying motorcycle toy. So I'm sure we could Google that and find out, but I hope that answers the question. That's certainly a fun one, right? Doing those awesome ramps and the gyro cycle and things like that. So,
yeah, no, that's amazing. So this next one actually comes from the Learning Consortium. Is where, like I mentioned earlier, where can we get our hands on the Dan Meyer action figure?
Oh,
and how
gosh.
much will they be worth one day? Autographed and non-autographed. I'll add this to the question.
Oh my gosh. I don't know that they're worth anything other than your all's love. But look, I got a whole case in my parents' basement, so you can find me on LinkedIn if you really want one, but probably eBay. Narnia Telmarine Soldier on eBay.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, so next one's from the consortium as well. Is do you find it difficult immersing yourself in the Generation Alpha world to do research for your products?
That is an awesome question. Yeah, so I answer that two ways. We've got to, in my position, we've got to be in touch with what's going on. We've got to stay ahead of all these trends. And the trends are happening more quickly than they've ever happened. So it's really hard to identify the trend and then get product to market before the trend is expired, right? So that's really hard to do. And I can't share all the secret sauce. We have a couple different ways that we do that. But yeah, it's about being on YouTube. It's about being on TikTok. It's about working with creators and influencers. It's about being in Roblox, being in all these things. And we find it, so you're just kind of scouring all these different things and identifying the opportunities. But then in terms of research, that's always been a little flawed within the toy industry, because if you can't ask a kid, do you think this is cool? They're going to be like, yeah, it's a toy, of course. So the best way to do that is to observe. So observing kids is how we do that, right? And then you have to be the experts in the room, observe their behavior, observe what they're watching, oftentimes ask their parents, what are they watching on YouTube? What are they watching? What are they playing on Roblox, right? And then kind of taking that and inferring it yourself, being the experts in the rooms. And it's wild. Like, I don't know if anybody read that article that the magazine did, but one of our really hot toys right now is called Skibidi Toilet. It's these toilets with heads that pop out, and they sing these weird phrases. Skibidi, skibidi. Skibidi is a slang term that Gen Alpha created themselves. It's wild. You're probably like, what the heck is that? And how did you even stumble upon that? And, I was telling Grayson earlier, it's no different than when I grew up. And one day someone was like, we got this idea. It's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And you're like, that is so weird. It's never going to work. And we all know how that turned out. So it's hard. You got to identify the opportunities by being in touch, and then you got to observe. That's how I'd answer that question.
Awesome. I love that. Full on just diving into the Gen Alpha pool, so to say. So this next one says, are there any Sigma Chi Easter eggs in any of your designs that we should keep an eye out for? I like that one.
Oh my goodness. I got to be honest. I have not done that yet, but now I guess I need to. I guess I need to. All right. I'll make you guys a promise. There will be one by Christmas of next year.
Love that. I'm glad this is also recorded, so we all have proof of that. Grand Pro Consul Ryan Tenby, glad to have you on the chat. He said, apologies, I joined late. So if you cover this already, forgive me. But I would love to hear any advice you have for our younger brothers who are just starting out in their career, how they might best climb the corporate ladder.
Yeah, good question. I think it goes back to a couple things we were talking about earlier and some new answers. Number one is don't be afraid to take risks, right? And part of that risk taking is reaching out, never eat alone. Ask people just for a lunch and ask them about their experiences. You're going to learn a lot, and you're also going to network at the same time. I think that's the most important thing. The other thing I'd say is have a genuine curiosity. You might not even know what you want to do yet. You might have your toe tipped in the career path, and this isn't for me. The best way to keep growing is just to keep going. Be inquisitive. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to take risks. Be super curious. Don't be on the status quo. So I'd say those are the biggest things. And the last thing is I'd even tweak the question to say, don't even think of it as climbing the corporate ladder. Think, how can I be the best at my job? And then you'll get to the top of the corporate ladder. Don't make the corporate ladder your goal. Make being excellent in what you do your goal.
Yeah. I love the fact that you brought up again, just going out, taking initiative, but also with a humble, genuine energy and intention behind it. So that was great. Brother Tim B, again, thank you for that question. So last question, then we're going to wrap up from Leslie. Do you have a favorite memory from your time as an undergrad Sigma Chi?
Oh my goodness. Of course I do. Do you want to guess what it is, Grayson?
I go immediately to Derby days, either that or initiation itself. Either side of the spectrum.
You're good. Both of those are right there. I'd say definitely when I got pinned. I can still remember it. I can remember the room. I can remember what it smelled like. I can remember like the emotion I had. It genuinely almost brings me to tears when that happened. And for the brothers on here, it's said when that's placed on you. I won't repeat it here for ritual purposes, but that's the highlight. That's it. It's as simple as that. It sticks with you this day. I remember it so clearly to this day.
Yeah.
But secondly, Derby days, of course.
I love that. Yeah, I completely agree. I think there is no greater moment for most Sigma Chi's, unless they get to pin a brother or a son or something like that, and then getting pinned themselves. So that's amazing. Well, this brings us to the end of a toy story. So Dan, thank you so much for chatting with us tonight. You provided invaluable insights and inspiration for our listeners, and your story really serves as a testament to the enduring brotherhood and the powerful network that we experience as Sigma Chi's. So brothers, I want to thank you for your participation in tonight's webinar. Those were absolutely amazing questions. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please share this Signature Speakers event with your friends and fellow Sigma Chi. We encourage you to visit the Sigma Chi Learning Consortium at any time to watch all of our previously recorded content and register for our upcoming live events. So again, thank you all for joining us. Dan, thank you for your time, energy, and expertise. Just brotherly love. And everybody, y'all have a wonderful night. And Hoke.
Thank you all.